Well, thank you everybody for joining today's webinar on minimizing accessibility risk with user flows monitoring. We're very, very excited about this today, and I know that everybody will come out with some great information and knowledge. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Everybody is in listen-only mode. However, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen in which you can type your questions, and our presenters will get to those as appropriate at the end of the webinar. There will be a follow-up sent to everybody after this, making sure all of your questions got answered, and even to set up if a lot of people after these webinars would like to chat a little bit more one-on-one, and you'd definitely be given the opportunity to do so and set something up there. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have David Sloan, who is our UX research lead here at TPG, and Matt Feldman, who's our Director of Customer Success. Without further ado, I'll take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Todd. Well, good afternoon, I guess good morning, and even good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Matt Feldman, Director of Customer Success here at TPG. I have about 20 years experience in the field of accessibility, ranging in a variety of different roles. And joining me today is the always insightful Mr. David Sloan. So David, why don't you just take a minute to share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, so my role at TPG is as user experience research lead, which means that a large amount of my work is accessibility focused research activities, mainly in user experience, but also on accessibility strategy. I've been with TPG for 7.5 years. And I just did the calculation. I think I've also got about 20 years experience in accessibility. Time flies quite quickly when you're not paying attention.
Sure does. Thanks, David. All right. Well, before we dig into our content, I just want to pause for a moment. And I believe we might have some folks who are looking to receive continuing education credit for this. There are 2 codes to receive that credit, one at the start of this presentation, one at the end. So to receive credit, please use our start code, which is user2020, and please email that code to credits@vispero.com. All right. So the first thing here is I want to talk a little bit about the outline of what we're going to cover. So today's webinar will first explore the importance of user flows in your accessibility strategy. I'm then going to take some time to introduce you to our ARC platform, for those that are not familiar yet, review the capabilities of our analytics service, and we'll provide a deeper understanding of the user's flow monitoring service elements. We will conduct a short demo of this service in action, and then following that demo, David will take us home with some important best practice recommendations and takeaways as it relates to user flow monitoring in accessible UX or user experience. We do have quite a bit to cover today, but I'll reserve some time at the end to address any questions that may arise. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to David, who will cover the importance of user flows in your accessibility strategy.
Thank you, Matt. So really, we want to start off today's webinar by putting user flows and accessibility into context, and in particular looking at what we mean from an accessible user experience perspective, and also from the perspective of an effective strategy for managing accessibility in product development and maintenance. So let's think a bit about the definition. What do we mean when we're talking about user flows? So we'll go to the next slide, Matt. So from an accessibility standpoint, conformance to standards such as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is foundational to accessibility strategy. Standards give you a really solid platform on which to build effective and engaging and inclusive user experience and digital products that people can use. So focusing on conformance to standards is important. That said, from the perspective of somebody with a disability, the most important thing is, can I use this digital product to achieve my goals? Can I be successful in completing tasks and achieving goals? And when we look at things from that perspective, there's an opportunity for us to grab when a product can be used by people with disabilities successfully to complete tasks independently and efficiently, without frustration, without annoyance, perhaps with delight even. And turning that over, there's a risk that exists when accessibility barriers exist that prevent people with disabilities from being able to complete those tasks. When those barriers are in place to stop people from being successful in completing tasks, then we have a problem. Next slide, Matt. So user flows are a really effective way to get us to think about how people would interact with a digital product that we are building or managing. User flows in the context of today's discussion, in the context of what we're sharing, are tightly defined and very specific ways in which a user may interact with a digital product. And what's critical about user flows is that they map to real-world use cases, real-world tasks that a user would expect to be able to complete when using the digital product. These flows may vary in complexity or length in terms of time taken or steps taken to complete them. They may be subtasks of a larger task. So it may be that a task can be broken down into a series of linear user flows, some of which might be repeated as part of other tasks when using the product. And they may be common interactions. They may be things that hundreds or thousands of users might be performing every day, or might be things that one user might be doing frequently when interacting with a product. But they may also represent what we might call stress cases, perhaps less frequent interactions that nevertheless are really critical to ensure that they can be performed seamlessly without interruption, given the potential consequences of being unable to complete those tasks. So let's think a little bit about how we might define user flows. And because they are effectively representations of real-world interactions, then we need to look at the product's requirements and how those were established. We need to look at the research, the business requirements behind the product, whether they might be user stories or scenarios or other representations that you have gathered from research with prospective users to help you understand how to build, what kind of functionality to include in the product, and the context of use, where and when and by whom the product is going to be used. So you're starting from real world data wherever possible. And you're using that perspective to generate very fine-grained, step-by-step descriptions of a particular interaction. And again, to help look at where you might be defining important user flows, look at high priority business critical tasks. What are the things that users really need to be able to do in order for the interaction with the product to be considered successful? What are the tasks where not being able to complete that task leads to very severe consequences, whether it's a failure to make a purchase or a booking, or a failure to successfully submit information in order to register for something, or to provide essential details in order to complete a task. And look also at tasks that might require interacting with a component that's reused in multiple places across the product. A form that might be used to capture address information, for example, or credit card information, or a means to capture date information, something that's reused for a particular purpose to capture a particular type of data. That could well be a very effective user flow to include in a set of key user flows. So now that we've defined user flows, we need to think about how we might monitor the accessibility of those user flows, given that the consequences of accessibility barriers in these flows are likely to be especially significant, likely to be especially, or the chances of them being noticed are especially high. So by defining these key user flows, we can firstly use them to prioritize attention to accessibility and development, particularly with limited resources or time. It may not be possible to attend to every accessibility objective for every single page or component of the site. By doing the work to identify those key user flows, you can prioritize attention in situations where resources or time is limited. Without attention to accessibility of user flows, it's possible that accessibility may degrade over time through the development lifecycle, or once a product has been launched, if a particular user flow is subject to changes in data or changes that are caused by a third-party piece of content that's part of that user flow. Without paying attention to the accessibility of that user flow, you have the risk of the accessibility degrading from a high level initially to a lower level, and with clear negative consequences. So how might we monitor user flow accessibility? Well, firstly, observing people performing tasks, moving through those user flows, and by people I'm meaning participants with disabilities in this context. That allows you to gather really rich data, direct observed data on user flow accessibility and the impact and location and nature of any barriers that are present. But doing so can be time consuming to organize. I know that, I do this work a lot. It yields very rich data, but there is a trade-off in terms of the effort required to organize and run, for example, a usability study involving people with disabilities. So there is another way, and that is through regular automated monitoring using software, which can be used to complement observation of users as a technique. And at this point, I'm going to hand back to Matt, who's going to take you through ARC, our own accessibility monitoring tool, and how it can support user flow monitoring.
Great. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Great start to provide some important foundation for us. So what is ARC? ARC is a SaaS cloud-based platform. It stands for Accessibility Resource Center. And since its release, it's grown considerably. It's now our primary solution for customer collaboration and solution delivery. It's not only where we want our clients to manage their programs, it's where we manage our accessibility programs of our products as well. Now, from a compliance and monitoring perspective, it provides powerful dashboards and insights for teams to analyze their products and content for accessibility conformance. This, of course, includes user flows, and we're excited to introduce this new capability during and as part of your accessibility program management. This is complemented by built-in knowledge base for researching techniques and solutions for common issues that are found. It also serves as a secure collaboration environment for any of the deliverables or the work products that are produced by any of our team. So, for example, if David is working with a customer on a user research project, a lot of that work can be delivered within the platform. It also has self-paced learning opportunities with content for a variety of different accessibility stakeholders. And finally, we have agile support via our ticket-based help desk for integration with your product development sprints or other on-demand needs. So the platform is comprised of a variety of different solutions that each can kind of scale based on your program's maturity. In some cases, your program's budget. So as your budget and program mature, well, we hope that the footprint within ARC can mature and grow as well. These different solutions fit into three primary categories. These are cloud services, which includes ARC Analytics, ARC Projects, and ARC Help Desk. We've got supporting content, which is our ARC Knowledge Base and ARC Tutor. And we have a variety of companion products as well. Now, we're not going to have time today to dig into a lot of these, but I just wanted to kind of give you that 10,000-foot perspective. And not to be overlooked, I do want to highlight the ARC API. So our solution has an API-first philosophy, which means that every one of the capabilities in our analytics service is also available to you via our RESTful API. This gives product teams the flexibility to resolve accessibility issues in their lower environments before that code reaches a customer or a user. So very powerful and important element in your accessibility program. We're here today to learn about user flows, and this capability technically sits across two of our cloud services, Arc Analytics for monitoring and Arc Projects as well. And later in the webinar, we'll come into this will all come into focus as we do an actual demo. I do want to point out that user flow monitoring is not new. In fact, we have been working with a number of clients to integrate this into their accessibility programs for a good portion of the year. We're excited to announce that in our upcoming release, this will become a self-serve capability to our customers. So we're quite literally going to be opening the doors for everyone to take advantage of this. In the future, clients will also be able to drive these user flows via our API with several additional capabilities coming to the service in Q4. So lots of exciting things on the horizon. So our primary capability that I kind of just referenced is Arc Analytics. This is also referred to as monitoring, crawling, scanning your website, and leveraging our Arc Rules Engine to identify accessibility failures. Monitoring is really fundamental. It's a fundamental need for any program. This provides a measurable baseline and tracking of your product or content's progress, in some cases regression against digital accessibility standards. Now, to understand Arc's analytics and monitoring, you have to have a grasp on the role of our rules engine. So I want to just take a couple seconds to provide some fundamentals there. So this rules engine is responsible for identifying the issues that impact users with disabilities. These issues are identified using a number of automated testing solutions. So we have Arc Analytics, as I referenced earlier. It's part of the Arc API. We have a tool called the Arc Toolkit, which is a browser extension which allows you to leverage these rules on your local machines. And then we also have Arc SDK for Node, which is a JavaScript library of that rules engine. All of these solutions share a common rules engine made up of rules. And this means whenever you test a particular test subject, for example, against an HTML page, you're going to have the same expected results. And those results will be consistent regardless of which solution you started with. The conformance data is standardized, and in the Arc terminology, we call this a collection of assertions. So the results are what we call assertions. So what's an assertion? Let's unpack that a little bit more. An assertion is a statement of a failure of a specific subject to satisfy accessibility testing logic, and that is expressed as a rule. So let's unpack that with an example. A rule might be image elements require an alt attribute. So an alt attribute provides a description of visual content like a photo or an icon to users who rely on screen readers. This rule is applied to a subject. In this case, we're gonna say that subject is a web page or a website, and the result is an accessibility failure related to a line of code on that page. So perhaps the company logo lacks an alt attribute. This is an assertion failure. So hopefully that helped to clear up that important term for us. So all of this assertion data is what's driving our dashboards. We've got these monitoring dashboards. These dashboards provide a way to track the accessibility of products over time and alert clients to the different trends that will influence their remediation efforts as well as test initiatives. Dashboards are available for numerous perspectives of your content. We've got a domain level dashboard, which is your 10,000 foot perspective. It kind of rolls up all of that content into one place for project managers or product leads. There's a folder level dashboard. We also have page level and WCAG success criteria and assertion specific dashboards as well. So there I just kind of spoke to you the purpose and the value that these dashboards can bring. Now, in the top right-hand corner of the screen, I've included an example of our performance visualization line chart. This shows the average number of failures identified during each scan. So that's what those different data points are at the points in the line. In this case, it appears the client was able to kind of halt a bad trend line where we saw the average number of issues rising. So with each scan, they were introducing additional accessibility bugs. Now, in this case, it appears that the client was able to halt that trend and address a remediation effort. And now happy to report that they are keeping those numbers consistently low and maintaining the accessibility of that product. So this is certainly something that we would see with many of our clients, and this is a very good success story. Just below this chart, we have an example of our recommended remediation priorities. So this panel calculates the top 3 WCAG success criteria and associated assertions. It provides you insights into both where your team needs to be trained and proposes some priorities on where you can dramatically improve your density score and improve the experience overall for individuals with disabilities that are interacting with your content. As far as roles that really benefit from these dashboards, you've got accessibility program leads, product owners. As I said earlier, we have different perspective dashboards like at WCAG and the assertion level. And these might be valuable to developers or folks that are responsible for remediating that content. A few use cases here. Well, we can leverage this to identify key conformance issues at the domain level or at the folder level or the page level. We can also drill down on the issues to understand the scope of the problem, and we can go all the way to the code level. So quite literally, the platform provides hopefully data that would benefit all different roles in your program. Okay. So with those kind of fundamental concepts in mind, let's talk about how we're expanding our monitoring service to include user flows. So website monitoring relies on a crawler engine and discoverable links to define what assets are being included. This is generally a collection of pages there. So you'll notice that the assets are domain pages. Now, in the case of user flow monitoring, on the other hand, we rely on defined steps to determine what the assets are. And we call this collection of assets components. So very important for us to understand the concept of what those assets are, and we'll look at examples of components in just a minute. Now, in both cases, this analytics data is then available in the ARC dashboards for further interaction and insights. So that is a consistent experience across both of these different monitoring services. All right, so now it's just a little visualization here, just to see the experience of asset discovery using our domain monitoring. So the ARC crawler browses a website like a user. It doesn't alter the pages; it just follows the links. So it starts at the home page. It identifies what are these available links. And then it crawls the top level pages. It then goes down a level, and it continues this process until it reaches a max number of URLs or a max depth that has been set for that monitoring. Now, user flows, as you would expect, is completely different. Similar to domain monitoring, you have to start from a URL, but from there, you have all the flexibility to define what you want those steps to be. Domain monitoring also is focused on a single domain, whereas our user flow monitoring can actually allow you to navigate multiple domains. You have complete control over defining those steps. So an example might be you start on the home page, you navigate through a widget to another page, and you work your way through this process that David had kind of highlighted earlier. And once you've defined these steps, you can define what are those components that you care about being monitored for accessibility. So we take those steps and we create this component list. And each of those components now can be scanned using a rules engine. And at that component level, we'll know how many failures, how many alerts, and we also break apart the number of contrast failures at that component level. So this can be very powerful, especially if you know that these flows are the most common elements that users are interacting with. You know that they're getting a lot of traffic, they're extremely important to the user, therefore you can isolate what those problems might be at that component level. So how do we do this? Well, we use what's called Selenium. Selenium is a free open source automated testing framework. It's used to validate web applications across different browsers and platforms. There are a number of free tools built around this framework that allow you to easily record a flow. And on the screen, I have a screenshot here of Catalan Recorder, but there are many more, including Selenium IDE and other popular examples. So we have built a variety of quick start guides to empower customers to build these scripts. And we look forward to getting that in the hands of folks so that they can own the process of building these scripts and then importing those within the platform. So we talked about Selenium. The Selenium testing framework uses a scripting language called Celanese. Celanese includes specific commands that allow you to define a user's interactions. Just to define a few here, opens the target web page. Delay would pause that script to allow content to load, for example. Click would of course click on a link button, checkbox, or a radio button. Type sets the value of an input field as if you were typing into that, and then select is also an option that we would leverage for identifying a value in a dropdown, for example. So what's missing here is how we actually run our rules engine against these components. And we trigger our rules engine with our own custom command, and that custom command is analyze asset. So as you are defining what that process is for the users, that user journey, when you've determined that you have a component that you would like to assess from an accessibility standpoint, you would insert the analyze asset command, and now you're going to have data that will roll up into our dashboards. So we've introduced a couple different kind of elements or layers here. First, we've got the user journey. So this is the process or the way that a user would navigate different pages, elements of pages, components. On top of that, we've got our Celanese, which is the translation of that user flow into these different commands so that we can then import them into the ARC platform. So in this case, we have open, we're selecting something, we're deciding at that point we want to analyze that asset, so we inject that command. We'll then click somewhere else, type something, and analyze that asset. And then all of those components, of course, are then pulled into a dashboard where you have analytics and great insights. So I want to take just a minute to talk a little bit about some use cases. I know David kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier. Think of user flows as dynamic studies of some aspect of your accessibility. So if you're a hotel site, then your booking process is critical. So maybe you need to focus on that. Patterns are the building blocks of any site or application, such as designs for your login controls or dialog boxes. So user flows can be used to isolate those patterns and then assess the accessibility of those patterns over time, which is incredibly powerful. In scans of your entire domains, it's hard to see which issues are really related to your own code and which are down to third-party widgets or constraints of a content management system, for example. So you can actually use user flows to raise those bugs to the vendors. So you can isolate and monitor third-party vendor widgets. And then finally, you can use site usage data to both identify the busiest user flows and to monitor how accessibility improvements affect user behaviors. All right, so we're now at that point in the demo where I'm going to take you actually into the platform. So we are going to see some of this, these concepts live. So let me do that with you really quick. All right. So if you've never logged into ARC, you don't have a free account. This is a pretty pretty good experience here. You see that the landing page focuses on monitoring, which is one of our primary capabilities. In this case, oh, sorry about that. Get back over here. So in this case, we've got our domain, a variety of different domains that are being monitored. And so let me just introduce you to a couple important concepts. We talk about WCAG density. This is the average number of issues that are found on each page. So if I'm scanning 100 pages, then there's an average of 87 issues on each page, and that's an incredibly high number. So the Independent here, one of the websites we are monitoring, that's an incredibly high number. In contrast, we've got two other websites that have significantly lower average number of failures. This data point here, the average number of failures per page, then can give us insights into how we're progressing or regressing with each scan. Oftentimes we're scanning on a monthly basis, but we give customers the flexibility to scan as often as they'd like. And we've got two different values here. We've got the last scan percentage and we got a lifetime percentage. So last scan represents your current scan and the one before. How are you doing? Are you making progress or are you regressing? So in the case of the Guardian, we've slightly improved the accessibility by improving this by 3.6%. And then over the life of your scan, so this would be the very first scan we've ever done, in the last scan. Over the life of that, you can see how you're doing as well. This is oftentimes a really powerful dashboard for project managers or executives. It gives you great perspective on which of your assets or which of your products are doing well and which might need a little more attention. We're really interested in user flows, so let me take you directly to that service. I mentioned earlier that it's really kind of a combination of our ARC Analytics and ARC Projects. So Projects is available here in the left-hand navigation. So I'm just going to expand that. And I've built a project workspace where we can interact with a couple of user flows, which I've defined. So let's go to our user flow demo workspace. All right, so our project workspace here includes some high-level but important data. So important to note which accessibility standard you're monitoring against. In this case, it's WCAG 2.0, and that regulation is ADA. We've got some status here on when it was last updated. We can provide a description of this workspace. And of course, there's probably a team behind this as well. So we identify who the team lead is, if there is a support team supporting this particular customer, and who the primary point of contact is for the workspace. Each workspace has two other really important elements. Number one, it has a place for you to set up, configure, and then get access to that high-level data. Hopefully this looks familiar because it's the same elements that we just looked at for our website and domain monitoring. So you see here that we have a user flow instead of a domain, and that user flow has an average number of failures per page. So that density score here is 3.3, which is excellent. That's a nice low number. I like to see that. The other piece or the other panel that's available at the workspace level is there is a specific document library. So if you have any relevant documents that would be associated with these user flow, this is a place where you could upload those assets. So let's explore the user flow monitoring roll-up data a little bit further. So we had talked about some of these data columns, the incremental and the lifetime progress. On the left-hand side, we do have these badges, which is a roll-up of all of your data. So in this case, we just have two simple flows Those flows are made up of 11 components, which we'll look at in detail. And then across all of those components, we've found 25 WCAG failures and 25 contrast failures. Now, what is unique about the platform is we do actually separate your WCAG color contrast failures from the other failures. Part of the reason is we don't want the color contrast failures to muddy the water. In many cases, that is half of your problem. Oftentimes, color contrast can be resolved with a couple changes to a style sheet. So we wanted to kind of pull that data out because the remediation recommendation is certainly different. All right, well, let's dig into one of the dashboards for these user flows. And the first one we're going to look at is our shopping experience. So this one is titled Purchase an Item. And as we explore the components, you'll notice exactly why we've titled it that. Across the top, we have the same interface and the same elements that are available to our domain monitoring clients. We've got a roll-up of the failures across the top. And again, remember that an assertion is result of that rule. So in this case, we've got 20 assertions that maps one-to-one to those WCAG failures. So that's why you see that same number there. We have 6 components that make up this flow, and we'll look at those in detail in just a second. When you're in the platform, anytime you see the magnifying glass, it means that you can go deeper into that content. So this will take us to a page where we can see exactly what those 6 components are and the results of those 6, and we'll look at that next. The other elements I just wanted to quickly highlight are within the monitoring settings. Here we're monitoring this on a weekly basis. You can view the data based on multiple rules engines. In this case, we're using both ARC and AXE, and the current active engine is ARC. If I wanted to see this from the AXE perspective, I can switch this by toggling, and now I'm looking at those failures from the AXE perspective. So very easy to interact with this content and see it from different perspectives. As I said before, we're viewing this from WCAG 2.0, but you can also switch to 2.1 if you'd like, depending on which standard that you're managing against. And then here's an example of our performance visualization. I highlighted this in the slide deck, and I showed you an example where a client had a number of accessibility issues that were increasing over time. In this case, while they don't have a ton of accessibility failures, the good news is those failures are dropping. So hopefully this individual is addressing those slowly over time to bring that number as low as possible. So a very nice trend here. On the left-hand side, next to our performance visualization, you can see how those failures break down from a WCAG success criteria perspective. All of our charts within the platform are available also in data tables. So we take pride in making sure that all of these components are accessible. And when you're viewing this from a data table perspective, you can also export this content to various formats like Excel, CSV, and PDF. We can also see this from the assertion perspective. So if I were a developer and I wanted to see which issues, which specific assertions, which rules were identifying are being used to identify the failures, then I could leverage this data table. And then finally, well, not finally, but in addition, we've got our recommended remediations here. This rolls up all of the data that we found, and this tells me that if we just fix all the issues found in these 3 success criteria, we'd fix 75% of the issues that we found here. So again, a very nice way for you to define what your priorities are, and you can see this at not only the WCAG level, but you can also see this at the assertion level. So a great way for you to already see some priorities bubbling up that maybe you should drive your attention to. And then finally at the bottom here, we do have our data table that shows all of the assertions. This includes both WCAG failures and alerts. An error is a WCAG failure, and alert is really a best practice. So you can filter all this content based on the priorities that you want to define. All right, we've looked at this from the top level. What I think is the most powerful really is that component level. So let's drill down and look at the components that make up this particular user flow. So again, this is the shopping experience of purchasing an item, and it's made up of a number of steps here. So first we have a landing page, and in this user flow, we do need to define which URL the component is on, and then we define, well, do we want to scan the entire page? Do we want to scan a portion of a page? And that's where the Selenium really comes into play. So in this case, we have a landing page. We've decided we want to see, we want to apply our rules against the entire page. So that's the entire HTML page. And then as we navigate through the flow, we've identified that there's an equipment landing page. So we again want to scan that entire page. We isolate a particular control that we've determined is very valuable. So there is this product sort control. And the good news here is we didn't find any accessibility failures. What you'll notice though is that while it does have the same URL as the equipment landing page, we've isolated that control using an ID. We also can isolate things using an XPath. So in our next example, we have a product display area. And here we've used an XPath to isolate that particular component. Finally, we've got a few more important steps here. There's the shopping cart, which has been isolated, and then we have a checkout step 1, which we've also isolated. The value here is perhaps you have a development team that's responsible just for the shopping cart or for portions of this page. Well, now you have a component-specific dashboard where they can go and they can explore what those specific issues are. So these are, again, are your components. Let's go one level deeper. And I tell you what, let's look at our shopping cart and explore those issues. Okay, we're one level deeper now. We're just looking at the shopping cart. So that very specific component. Something that we don't provide currently with our domain monitoring is we don't provide a screenshot of that page. And so that's really valuable to see that visually. Additionally, we provide the source code. At the time that this was scanned, we capture the screenshot, we capture the source code, it's right there available to you. And now we're looking at just those accessibility issues that were identified within this component. Similar to our other dashboards, you can see it from our WCAG perspective, the assertion engine perspective. You can see the performance visualization. In this case, nothing has moved. We found 6 issues since the first time we scanned it, and we just haven't made any progress here. So hopefully they'll leverage that data at some point to move the needle. And then you can also explore it all the way down to the code level. So if I select this particular assertion, very powerfully, I can see the source code where that specific issue is associated. So if I'm a developer, this is really the level I need to be at. The other powerful thing is we're able to provide solutions. So here we have a form control without visible label text, and we have some recommended resources here on how you could solve this problem through our knowledge base. So this provides direct links to techniques that would provide solutions here. This includes code snippets and examples. But again, you know, this is something that at the developer level you're probably interested in. All right. Well, I've shown you one example, but I want to give you another example. So that was an actual flow for a shopping cart experience. But I'd also talked about maybe you want to leverage a user flow to explore a set of templates or a component library. So in this case, what we've done is instead of isolating a user journey to different through a process, what we've done is we've isolated different templates. So perhaps your organization has a number of templates that you use within your company. This is a great way for you to isolate those and then to know exactly where those problems are, where those accessibility failures are with each of those. The same thing could be true with a pattern library. Maybe this isolates a calendar widget and a dropdown that are used many times throughout your product. So another powerful way and use case for user flow. All right, well, I'm going to pause for a second now, and I'm going to hand it back over to David, who's going to talk a little bit more about some important accessible UX best practices and recommended strategy there.
Thank you, Matt. So based on that demonstration, that's shown you how you can define and monitor a user flow or several user flows and get automatically generated accessibility results from regular ongoing monitoring. And this is something that's potentially really powerful as part of an accessible user experience strategy, in that it helps answer the question, so what? You know, an automated accessibility monitoring tool can identify some issues, but you're not necessarily sure just what that means for users who are affected. By understanding where an issue lies within a defined user flow that maps to a real world interaction that a user would be expected to carry out using the product, when a barrier is found, when an accessibility issue is found in that flow, that gives you a strong sense that there is a business critical problem that needs to be addressed. And it might be valuable data to help you prioritize your efforts in that way. It might also be valuable data to help you make the case internally to address efforts to get support for focusing on remediating issues in that way. So effectively, user flow monitoring is one way to allow you to connect accessibility conformance issues with real world impact on real people. So as a kind of monitoring and prioritization tool, it's potentially a very valuable part of an accessibility strategy. It is important to note that, like all automated accessibility monitoring tools, ARC can't test for every single possible accessibility barrier that's present. So this is something that should be complemented with manual inspection of issues that an automated tool cannot detect. And it's also something that complements usability evaluation, user research activities with people with disabilities to get that first-hand perspective on current issues and your effectiveness in addressing them. In particular, if you have developed a prototype design of a new piece of functionality or reworking an existing piece of functionality, it's still very valuable to arrange and run either moderated or unmoderated usability evaluations with people with disabilities to get that fuller context from the perspective of real users. And similarly, when you have invested effort in remediating issues, then usability evaluation with people with disabilities can help you validate those remediation efforts. But ultimately, automated user flow monitoring is an opportunity to provide an ongoing, regular source of data based on definitions of aspects or interactions with your product that map to real world interactions, and that provides particular value to your overall accessibility strategy. So that concludes the body of the webinar. You've heard the UX and business value of including user flow monitoring in accessibility strategy, and you've experienced how ARC can provide that functionality, how that can be supported as part of ARC's suite of tools. So at this point, I think we'll shift to questions and answers on either the functionality of ARC's user flow monitoring or in how you might integrate that into your accessibility strategy.
Great. So David, I think maybe what makes sense, we do have a number of open questions. So I'm just going to read those aloud and we'll do our best to answer them based on who needs to. So first we have a question from Chris. Will there be a transcript and recording available after this webinar? Todd, that's probably for you. Will there in fact be transcript and recording available after the webinar?
There will be a recording. The captioner was having a hard time getting into captioning, so I'm going to have to figure this out after the meeting, see if we can get that done after the fact. So my apologies for that. He and I have been kind of typing back and forth during this whole thing trying to get him in, but there will be a recording. We'll work on getting it captioned as well after the fact.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Our next question is from Mark. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us today. So your question is, how does monitoring user flows differ by platform? For example, how we automatically monitor user flows on the web likely differs from how we might do this on native iOS and Android. Great question. So this service is currently only available for the web. We do not offer this capability for native iOS and Android at this time. So hopefully that answers that question. Someone was curious to clarify the difference between a failure, an alert, and an assertion. So a failure is a WCAG failure. It is an accessibility issue that maps to a specific WCAG success criteria. An alert is what we consider a best practice. So it's not necessarily a WCAG failure. However, it impacts users with disabilities. So it should certainly be a consideration to resolve. And then an assertion is, again, the result of a failure with one of our rules. So when it comes to the ARC rules engine, you're going to see a one-to-one relationship with failure and assertion because it's a one-to-one mapping. I believe that the Actuals engine, however, can map a assertion to multiple WCAG success criteria. So that's why we include that clarification within the interface. Someone asked, and this was Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Is it possible to compare in a single view what ARC versus ACTS is finding? No, at this time, it's really more of a toggle. You can view the dashboard data from the ARC rules engine perspective or the Actuals engine perspective. They're not currently available in a single view. Do you support AAA conformance level as well? Well, we do support AAA, but at that level, it's very difficult to find rules that would be justifiable and could be tested. AAA is the ultimate level when it comes to compliance and accessibility. Therefore, I'm not sure that we have any ARC specific AAA level rules. Therefore, that's why you're not seeing it bubble up in the platform. Someone asked if you could customize or add your own rules or assertions. Not at this time. However, we know that that is certainly a future roadmap capability that we are eager to introduce to everyone. But at this time, you cannot customize or add your own rules. Monica asks, how do you see where the color contrast violations are? That's a great question. Yeah, so within the dashboard, we do tell you how many color contrast issues are at the domain level and then at the component level. This is where our ARC toolkit comes into play. When you can actually run the same rules on a particular page using a browser, that's where you're going to see those color contrast issues, those specific issues. All right, Amitesh has a couple questions for us. Let's run through these. Question 1, when there is an error or any type of error, web page error or failing an accessibility guideline, can we configure the ARC platform to generate an email or tap into logs which contains the details of the error? Can ARC clients tap into the logs with their instance of Splunk? Right, Amitesh. So I have a feeling these are going to be good questions, but they might require additional conversation. So I think the best way is for us to maybe schedule some time together. And Todd, maybe we can reach out to Amitesh later to get that set up. But a lot of the questions I'm seeing here probably have multiple solutions. So it might be a combination of using our Arc API in addition to some of the capabilities within the platform, but we'd be happy to maybe dig into that a little bit more with you later. Next question we have is, what has been the experience with troubleshooting Selenium scripts? Selenium is notoriously fussy and fragile to work with historically. That's a great question. Yes, so the customers that we work with, you're absolutely right that it can be somewhat fragile. This is actually one of the reasons we are opening this up as a self-serve capability, so that all of that troubleshooting does not require our support. We are here to support you, obviously, but I think the self-serve capabilities, the quick start guides, and all those resources that we're building are intended to make that process a little bit easier. Since there are often multiple ways to skin the cat, and this is from Monica, how do you handle failures where the automated test found an issue, but when you use a screen reader, there really is no issue? Can you manually dismiss failures? How do you manage this? So right now you can't hide issues from the dashboard, but that is certainly something I can take back to the product team to see if we can introduce for you. Okay, we're getting there. Adam asks, how comprehensive is your standards library? For instance, we've had to adjust a few things once we attempted to move into a certain state's market because that state had different accessibility standards than other states. Well, so a lot of our dashboard and a lot of our content revolves around WCAG, which is a global standard. We do have the flexibility for you to switch between WCAG 2.0 and 2.1. We're also introducing the ability for you to test against different guidelines. So I think earlier I saw a question about AOTA. You know, a lot of that are things that we're looking at, and we're looking for our customers to have the flexibility to view the data from the perspective of all of these different guidelines and all of these different standards. Let's see here. Someone asked, projects is not an option in Arc for me. Is there user flow monitoring an additional feature cost? Yeah, so earlier I hinted that this is something we're turning on in our next release. So you're not going to see projects until that release. So just stick with us for another week or two, and soon you're going to have projects and workspaces available to you, and you'll be able to interact with all these great features. Is setting up the task flow monitoring, do custom Selenium scripts need to be built based on the site being monitored? So yes, the Selenium script is there's a couple different ways you can build it. You can build it from scratch, or you can inject our analyze asset command into an existing script and attempt to pull it into the platform. We have had customers that have used both of those. And it just might require a little troubleshooting to see how it initializes and how the scan goes, but there's a couple different ways to do that. Okay, and then Monica asked, do you support scanning a mobile website with the same domain as desktop? So not a native app and not m.abc.com. Yeah, so Monica, we actually can. I didn't hit that piece of the configuration process, but we can capture screenshots and capture source code and analyze at different viewports. So we can, for example, conduct a user flow at the desktop view. We can also conduct a flow at the mobile view or the tablet view. So excellent question. You got me the opportunity to highlight that capability for us. Alrighty, there's a couple more. Let's see if we can get through these really quick. We got 1 minute. When is the planned day of the release? I believe we're planning on releasing next week. So perhaps you can anticipate this at the end of the week next week. And it looks like we got a couple more in here, but we're running out of time. So what we'll do, Todd, is we can follow up with those individuals directly, and we'll be happy to try to answer all those questions. But I'm going to pause now, and I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for joining us. And then one final point of information here. For those that are using or are seeking to use continuing education credits, that ENCODE is actually flow. I apologize. It's flows, FLOWS 2020, and that should be sent to credits@vispero.com. So it's not user 2020. That was the first code. It's flows, FLOWS 2020, and please send that to credits@vispero.com. All right, Todd, I'm going to hand it back over to you, sir.
All right. Well, great job as always. Thank you so much for presenting. Thank you everybody for joining, and look for some follow-up to come over the next day or so to make sure all the questions got answered and that we can set you on the correct path. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.